Nestled in a serene corner of suburbia, my neighborhood boasts tree-lined streets, neatly manicured lawns, and homes that blend seamlessly into the picturesque landscape. Each house tells a story of families enjoying a peaceful life, punctuated by children playing in yards, friendly neighbors waving hello, and evening barbecues filling the air with the scent of grilled delights. However, beneath this idyllic exterior lies a layer of tension, one that is carefully orchestrated by our Homeowners Association, HOA. The HOA in our community wields considerable power. Comprised of local residents, it governs everything from the color you can paint your front door to the type of fence you can install. Meetings are held regularly, often filled with passionate debates over landscaping choices or mailboxes. While their intentions may be grounded in maintaining property values and aesthetic uniformity, many residents find themselves at odds with an institution that seems to have an unyielding grip on their freedom to express individuality. It is within this tightly regulated environment that the archetype of the HOA Karen emerges. This character embodies an unwavering dedication to enforcing rules and regulations, often to the detriment of neighborly relations. With her clipboard in hand and a pen poised to document perceived infractions, she can turn even the most benign situation into a battleground of compliance. She views every improperly trimmed hedge or slightly misplaced garden gnome as a personal affront to the order she cherishes. In my experience, her name was Janet, a self-appointed guardian of neighborhood standards who seemed to revel in her power. My first encounter with Janet was innocuous enough. I had just moved into my new home, eager to unpack boxes and settle into my fresh beginning. A few days later, as I stepped outside to check on my car parked in the driveway, a quiet two-car span, I noticed it had been obstructed by Janet's van parked askew at the end of my driveway. My pulse quickened as I approached her vehicle, but before I could say anything, she ambled over with an expression that suggested I was about to receive a lesson in HOA protocol. "I'm sorry," she began without preamble, "but your driveway isn't properly marked according to Section 5B of our bylaws." Bewildered but determined not to appear flustered, I listened as she rattled off regulations about how driveways should be unobstructed for safety reasons. Despite my protest that her van was what truly obstructed access, an argument met with little sympathy, she stood firm. As we argued over trivialities while the sun beat down on us, it became painfully evident that this was only the beginning of an ongoing power struggle between personal liberties and HOA guidelines. Janet's refusal to budge sparked something within me, an urge not just to comply, but to reclaim my space within those lines drawn so rigidly by our HOA. With tension simmering in our little community and her voice ringing in my ears, ideas began forming like clouds gathering before a storm. How could I assert myself against this bureaucratic barrier? Little did I know that these frustrations would eventually lead me down an unexpectedly creative path, the journey toward building a moat around my property, complete with an operational drawbridge. The days following my move into that quaint neighborhood were filled with excitement and anticipation. I envisioned barbecues with neighbors, the thrill of hosting gatherings, and the simple pleasure of enjoying the tranquility my new home promised. However, the reality soon churned beneath the surface. My initial interactions with Janet had been brief and innocuous. She had stopped by to welcome me with her clipboard in hand, rattling off a list of HOA rules as if she were reciting a sacred creed. I nodded politely, mentally cataloging the absurdity of some regulations, but I had no idea that our next encounter would ignite a conflict that would redefine my sense of personal freedom. It was a Tuesday morning when the incident occurred. The sun streamed through my kitchen window as I sipped my coffee, savoring the last few moments of calm before diving into work. With my laptop set up on the dining table, I glanced outside to check on my car parked in the driveway. To my dismay, I found Janet's van blocking my access, its bolt parked at an awkward angle right at the end of my driveway. I could feel my irritation bubbling up. I had planned to leave for an important meeting, and her vehicle was effectively trapping me in my own home. As I stepped outside, I could see her leisurely tending to her garden across the street, oblivious to the chaos she had created. With a deep breath, I approached her, hoping for a friendly resolution. "Janet," I called out, trying to keep my tone even. Could you move your van? It's blocking my driveway." She turned, her expression shifting from surprise to immediate defensiveness. Instead of offering an apology or explanation, she crossed her arms and stated, "You know that your driveway should be unobstructed for safety reasons according to Section 5B of the HOA bylaws." Her words dripped with a condescending tone that made my blood boil. I attempted to reason with her, pointing out that it was her van obstructing the driveway and that I needed to leave for work. But Janet showed little concern for my predicament. In her mind, she was the enforcer of order, and I was merely another resident who couldn't grasp the importance of adhering to the rules that governed our community. As we stood there in the sweltering heat, surrounded by the idyllic charm of our surroundings, a palpable tension thickened the air between us. This wasn't just about a car blocking a driveway. It felt profoundly symbolic, a struggle between personal rights and imposed regulations. The more she insisted on her stance, the more resolved I became to reclaim my sense of autonomy. With our conversation devolving into a stale debate over trivialities, I felt a rush of frustration transform into something more potent, inspiration. If she wanted to dictate how I live in my own space, then perhaps it was time to take matters into my own hands. Literally. The idea of constructing a moat around my property began to take shape in my mind as an outrageous yet oddly appealing solution to assert my independence from this tyrannical enforcement. In that moment, trapped by Janet's vehicle and her rigid interpretation of HOA rules, I realized that I was ready to fight back, creatively. What better way to reclaim my territory than by turning it into a fortress? A moat in Drawbridge would not only serve as a physical barrier against future encroachments, but also stand as a testament to my defiance against a system that threatened to stifle individuality. Standing in my driveway, my frustration swirled through me like a summer storm. Janet's infuriating condescension still echoed in my ears, each syllable highlighting the absurdity of the situation. Here I was, a new homeowner eager to embrace suburban life, while she had turned my dreams of cozy gatherings into a bureaucratic nightmare. But rather than allowing myself to be swallowed by irritation or defeat, a spark ignited within me, a desire not just to react but to take decisive action. As I leaned against the side of my house, surveying the scene before me, Janet continuing her gardening as if nothing were amiss, I began to consider my options. Simply confronting her again about the parking infraction felt futile. It would likely yield more arguments and little change. Instead, I craved an imaginative solution, something that would allow me to express my individuality while also adhering to the very rules she wielded like a weapon. It occurred to me then, why not create something that would redefine the boundaries of my property? What if I could build a moat? It felt ludicrous at first, but soon enough, the idea transformed into a captivating vision. A moat would not only provide a clear physical barrier, but also serve as a captivating statement against the rigidity of HOA regulations. How could they argue with a legally built moat? I mused. It was an idea bursting with whimsy and determination. The prospect of constructing a moat sparked my imagination further. I envisioned lush greenery surrounding shimmering water, an environment that would invite tranquility rather than hostility. There would be fish darting through the water, and perhaps even flowering plants cascading over the banks. This could be an oasis rather than merely a guard against Janet's encroachments. However, I quickly realized that embarking on this creative venture would require more than just vision. It needed to be practical and legally sound if I were to avoid further confrontations with the HOA. My first step was research. I needed to navigate local zoning laws and HOA regulations without falling into another trap of compliance issues. Frantically scribbling down notes and gathering information online became my new obsession as I dove into forums and municipal resources. I discovered that most towns had allowances for decorative landscaping features, including water features such as ponds or even moats, as long as they met certain conditions for safety and drainage. The more I read, the more confident I grew that this undertaking could very well fall within legal parameters if executed correctly. With both excitement and trepidation coursing through me, I began sketching designs that balanced creativity with compliance. It wouldn't be enough simply to build a moat. It had to be aesthetically pleasing and functional, while also ensuring it didn't interfere with any existing structures or HOA bylaws concerning property boundaries. The idea of incorporating an operational drawbridge added an element of playfulness that made the whole project feel even more exhilarating. The decision solidified in my mind. This was how I would reclaim my territory, not just physically, but also architecturally and artistically. Like anyone embarking on a grand adventure, I felt both nervous and invigorated at the prospect ahead, a journey towards independence fueled by both creativity and legal diligence. From that moment onward, each shovel of dirt dug from my yard symbolized not just resistance against Janet's rules, but a bold reclamation of my right to express myself in my own home. With the idea of constructing a moat taking firm root in my mind, I knew that creativity alone wouldn't suffice. I needed to ensure my grand plan adhered to all local laws and HOA guidelines. The last thing I wanted was for my whimsical endeavor to land me in hot water, not only with Janet but also with city officials. With determination coursing through me, I set off on a mission to gather as much information as possible. My first step was to visit the city's official website. There, I scoured regulations regarding landscaping features, especially those concerning water elements. To my surprise, I discovered that many municipalities encourage decorative landscaping, provided it complied with safety and zoning standards. This initial revelation invigorated me, but it also underscored the importance of thorough research. There were still a myriad of details to consider. Armed with curiosity and a notepad, I headed to the local planning department for a face-to-face consultation. The moment I stepped inside the building, the sterile environment buzzed with a mixture of bureaucracy and community service. After waiting in line behind what seemed like an army of permit seekers, I finally reached an amiable clerk who seemed willing to help. "Hi there," I said, introducing my project in vague terms at first so as not to raise any red flags. "I'm interested in possibly adding some unique landscaping features to my property, maybe even something involving water." The clerk looked intrigued but cautious. She asked for specifics and patiently listened as I described my vision for a moat and drawbridge. To my delight, she responded positively but noted that certain criteria would need to be met. The moat would require proper drainage, ensuring it wouldn't affect neighboring properties or create flooding issues. Eagerly jotting down her insights, I then asked about permits necessary for such an undertaking. "You'll likely need an excavation permit," she advised, "and depending on how deep you want it to be, there may be additional regulations pertaining to property boundaries." Feeling more equipped than before, I left the planning office with various pamphlets and contact information for engineers who could assist with my design considerations. It was crucial that any structure constructed, especially one involving water, was safe and compliant with existing laws. Next came the daunting task of reviewing HOA guidelines once again. Armed with newfound knowledge from the city's regulations, I pored over the HOA's lengthy rulebook like it was an ancient tome filled with secrets waiting to be unearthed. Sections on landscaping had always felt restrictive before. However, now they appeared less daunting. I could focus on what might be possible rather than what wasn't allowed. I quickly noted key points. As long as any feature added did not exceed specified heights or encroach on neighbors' views or properties, there was room for maneuvering creatively within these constraints. Each guideline transformed from a barrier into an opportunity, a canvas upon which I could paint my imaginative escape. Having reviewed both city requirements and HOA stipulations meticulously ensured that by the time construction began, every aspect would meet legal demands while still allowing my vision to flourish without compromise. Excitement bubbled beneath my skin as ideas flowed freely. The drawbridge could incorporate decorative elements, paying homage to fairy tales while still functioning correctly. As weeks passed and plans solidified into tangible blueprints complete with visual aids, each step solidified my commitment not just to building a moat but establishing a strong case for individual rights within this community dominated by stringent rules. Little did Janet know that her actions had ignited not just resistance but also fueled creativity, an unyielding resolve breaking free from conventionality. With the legal groundwork laid and a clearer vision emerging, I felt a surge of excitement as I plunged into the design phase for my moat and drawbridge. The first order of business was sketching out rough plans, allowing my imagination to run wild while still being mindful of practicality and compliance. I wanted a design that was both visually striking and functional, something that could stand up to HOA scrutiny while serving as a whimsical centerpiece for my yard. Starting with the moat, I envisioned a wide, shallow body of water that would gracefully curve around the perimeter of my property. The width needed to be substantial enough not just to look impressive, but also to provide an effective barrier against unwanted parking or access. I sketched various shapes, circular, oval, and even serpentine forms that snaked around the landscape like something from a fairy tale. Ultimately, I decided on a gentle oval, as it would integrate well with existing trees and flower beds. Next came considerations for depth. Safety would be paramount. Therefore, I aimed for a depth of about 2 feet, which would allow for aquatic plants and fish while ensuring it wouldn't pose a drowning hazard for neighborhood children or pets. To incorporate drainage effectively, a requirement outlined by city officials, I included sloping edges leading into the moat to prevent any pooling dirt or mud from infringing on neighboring properties during heavy rains. As visions of shimmering water took shape in my mind, it became apparent that some landscaping features could enhance its appearance. Experimenting on paper with plants like reeds and iris scattered around the banks woke up a sense of eco-friendliness in me. They would not only beautify but absorb excess nutrients, keeping the water clear and inviting. Turning my attention to the drawbridge design ignited another layer of creativity. Something functional yet enchanting needed drafting. It had to physically connect my yard's 2 sides while looking right out of a storybook. My initial thoughts circled around classic wooden beams with intricate railings adorned by simple carvings reminiscent of medieval artistry. To balance traditional aesthetics with sturdiness was key. Therefore, I researched easily accessible materials that could withstand weather conditions without warping or rotting over time. Pressure-treated wood caught my eye. It promised longevity while still looking charming. The mechanics behind raising and lowering it presented another opportunity for ingenious engineering solutions. After poring over various mechanisms online, I settled on a simple pulley system complemented by counterweights. This design promised ease of use without too much strain on any individual operating it. Speaking practically again reminded me that this drawbridge wouldn't function solely as an aesthetic feature. It was crucial in deterring further nuisances caused by unsanctioned vehicles blocking access down the line, and Janetsville wouldn't stand much chance against such an impressive structure. Documenting every aspect meticulously transformed my creative ideas into actionable plans infused with careful thought about functionality versus pure whimsy. As sketches morphed into blueprints filled with dimensions noted in precision lines drawn in pencil, I knew I was already carving out more than just physical structures. I was literally shaping perceptions about independence and individual rights within this community bound by unwritten rules. At moments when doubt crept in or fear gnawed at me regarding potential backlash from neighbors or Janet herself viewing these changes, I reminded myself, this is my space. The moat would serve as both protection from relentless intrusions and a symbol articulating defiance against servitude under arbitrary guidelines threatening personal expression. The day had finally arrived to break ground on my moat and drawbridge, an endeavor that felt part construction project and part whimsical fairy tale adventure. Armed with blueprints, enthusiasm, and a brand new shovel, I stood in my yard, ready to transform these sketches into reality. Little did I know that the construction process would be filled with unexpected twists and plenty of laughs. The first challenge emerged immediately: the weather. What had started as a sunny morning quickly turned into a downpour that seemed to mock my grand plans. As I stood there, drenched and shivering, I half joked to myself that perhaps Mother Nature was an HOA member herself, disapproving of my creative rebellion. But rather than retreating into the comfort of my home, I decided to embrace the rain. After all, if I was digging a moat, why not start with some genuine water? Once the storm cleared and the clouds rolled away, I got to work. The initial digging was exhilarating. Each scoop of dirt felt like a minor victory. However, reality struck as my shovel hit something hard after just a few feet roots. The previous owners of my home had apparently planted a small forest of trees around the perimeter, and now they were fighting back against my ambitious plans. Armed with a pair of pruning shears and sheer determination, I spent hours wrestling with stubborn roots, constantly muttering about how this was nature's way of keeping me in check. As I finally made progress on the moat shape, it became apparent that my initial measurements were slightly off. What I had envisioned as a graceful curve now resembled more of an awkward zigzag. A neighbor walking his dog paused to observe the spectacle before him, a soaking wet person frantically adjusting the layout with a tape measure and shovel. He chuckled and shouted over, "Are you building a moat or playing connect the dots?" After several days of digging and some friendly teasing from neighbors, I moved on to constructing the actual drawbridge. With tools spread out across my yard like an amateur workshop, I learned that power tools can be both a blessing and a curse. One moment, I was happily drilling away when suddenly my drill sputtered and died mid-task. After frantic fiddling with batteries and frustration mounting like the pile of dirt next to me, I discovered that I hadn't charged it properly before starting. Rookie mistake. Amidst these challenges, there were also moments of pure joy. As I elevated the drawbridge using my carefully crafted pulley system, it worked flawlessly on the first try, a small miracle in itself. Watching it rise and fall smoothly gave me a rush of pride. However, this excitement was short-lived. The very next day, while demonstrating it to an eager friend, one of the counterweights got stuck. We both stood there laughing uncontrollably as I struggled to free it while assuring him that this was actually part of the plan, an interactive feature for visitors. The final hurdle came when it was time to fill the moat with water. I had envisioned this part as picturesque, the gentle flow filling the moat to create an inviting aquatic sanctuary. Instead, what happened was akin to creating a mini tidal wave as water rushed in from the hose, splashing everywhere except where it was supposed to go. Neighbors gathered in curiosity as I scrambled to redirect the flow while trying and failing not to look like a complete fool. Despite these unexpected challenges and comedic mishaps along the way, each moment reaffirmed my resolve. The moat began to take shape in its own quirky way, embodying not only my creativity but also my tenacity against whatever hurdles life, or Janet, threw at me. Finally stepping back to admire my work, I realized that this project was more than just a physical barrier. It was also a testament to resilience, laughter, and community spirit amid adversity, a whimsical fortress against conformity that would surely raise eyebrows among those who dared question my right to individuality. As the moat and drawbridge took shape in my yard, word spread quickly throughout the neighborhood. I could see curious faces peering out of windows, whispering to one another as they caught sight of my whimsical construction project. Some neighbors approached with amused expressions, while others wore more serious looks, clearly taken aback by my unconventional endeavor. The first to come over was my neighbor, Dave, an affable retiree who had a penchant for gardening and a sense of humor that hadn't dulled with age. He strolled up with his dog, Chuck, who seemed just as curious about my project as he was. "Well, if it isn't the new moat. You planning to keep the dragon at bay too?" he quipped, grinning widely. His light-hearted attitude served as a pleasant reminder that not everyone viewed my creativity with trepidation. However, not all reactions were so light-hearted. The following evening, as I was adjusting the drawbridge mechanism, a minor glitch had arisen. Janet appeared at my doorstep with a frown etched across her face. Clutching a clipboard tightly to her chest, she began reading off community regulations with all the fervor of a drill sergeant. "You know, this moat could potentially diminish property values and cause drainage issues for your neighbors," she warned, raising an eyebrow like she was inspecting dangerous contraband. "Oh, really?" "Because I've been told it might just enhance property values, especially if I throw in a couple of fish," I retorted as I attempted to maintain my composure. I could see her struggling to maintain her disapproving facade. Deep down, I sensed she was just perturbed by the creativity displayed so brazenly against the backdrop of rigid rules. In stark contrast, several other neighbors rallied behind me in defense of my project. A small gathering began to form during weekends when I worked on the moat. Families brought their kids over to witness the great moat construction. Children were enamored with the drawbridge mechanism. Some even volunteered to help me haul dirt or fetch tools from around the yard. It felt good knowing I had unwittingly turned my struggle for personal expression into a communal affair. Amid supportive cheers and laughter while kids unsuccessfully attempted pirate battles on the bridge, however, occasional murmurings of dissent arose. A woman from down the street approached, scowling. "I can't believe you're turning our neighborhood into Disneyland," she exclaimed with disdain before walking away with her arms crossed. Such mixed feelings were representative of wider sentiments within the community. Some found joy in my whimsical rebellion against conformity, while others believed it chipped away at the meticulously curated aesthetic they expected from our surroundings. Conversations buzzing around front yards were polarizing. A mix of support and skepticism underscored how creative expression often walks alongside criticism. Surprisingly, though opposition persisted from Janet and some of her supporters, the majority seemed amused by my project, or at least intrigued by its whimsical charm. Each week brought new faces and new reactions. Children laughed and played in the moat's shallow edges while their parents snapped pictures, a seemingly harmless rebellion against HOA norms unfolding in real time. This blend of both encouragement and resistance fueled my resolve further. Not only was this moat becoming a feature piece of property, but also transforming it into a statement about individual expression and community interaction. As laughter echoed back at Janet's disapproval and delighted children tested out whatever bizarre drawbridge features I could devise next, I realized that perhaps what truly mattered wasn't just building a moat but fostering connections within our neighborhood, inspiring them to question established norms while embracing creativity. The construction of my moat and drawbridge hadn't gone unnoticed. It wasn't long before the HOA officially caught wind of my unconventional project. One sunny afternoon, as I was adjusting the drawbridge for what felt like the 100th time, I received a formal letter in the mail from the Homeowners Association. The envelope was thick and official-looking, bearing the HOA logo with an ominous seal that immediately sent a ripple of anxiety through me. Opening it felt like peeling back layers of anticipation. Inside, I found a letter expressing their concerns over my recent developments. The tone was formal, but unmistakably serious. They cited potential violations regarding property values, safety issues related to the open water, and possible zoning infractions. "Your moat may present drainage challenges," they wrote, "and it is our responsibility to ensure all homeowners adhere to established community standards." The letter also hinted at complaints from other residents. None other than Janet herself must have had a hand in rallying support against my peculiar creation. It was clear that not everyone appreciated my artistic expression as much as I did. Determined not to back down, I decided to attend the next HOA meeting, hoping to address their concerns head-on and defend my vision for individuality within the community. When I arrived at the meeting hall, a modest building adorned with flyers about neighborhood safety and upcoming events, I could feel a tension brewing in the air. A mix of curiosity and apprehension washed over me as I took a seat among familiar faces, including Janet's glaring eyes locked onto me like a hawk honing in on its prey. As discussions unfolded about various neighborhood matters, landscaping compliance here, fence height there, I patiently awaited my turn to speak. Finally, when it came time for community updates under new business, I raised my hand, feeling both empowered and nervous. "Thank you for allowing me to address this," I began, trying to keep my voice steady as I recounted how thorough my research had been regarding local regulations and HOA guidelines before proceeding with construction. "I've consulted city officials, ensured all aspects meet safety codes, and designed this moat with drainage in mind." Janet interjected almost immediately with her signature frown etched deep on her face. "But what about property values? Who will want to live next door to a moat?" Her words resonated throughout the room like an echo bouncing off cold walls. "Actually," I countered confidently, "many studies suggest unique landscaping features can increase property values by creating distinctiveness that stands out in neighborhoods saturated with cookie-cutter homes." As murmurs rippled through the audience, some intrigued by this perspective, I pressed on about fostering creativity within our community rather than stifling it. The tension hung thickly in the air as various members voiced their opinions. Some voiced support for my vision, while others echoed Janet's apprehensions about safety and aesthetic disruption. A few neighbors stood up during open discussion moments, Some shared stories of their children enjoying playtime around the moat, while others worried about possible liabilities or maintenance concerns. Ultimately, while no resolution was reached that evening, no clear path forward delineated between conformity or creativity, the conversation had sparked something new. Awareness among neighbors about balancing individual expression with communal expectations. The HOA promised further investigation into safety aspects while allowing me to continue work until any potential violations were formally identified. As I left that meeting feeling invigorated yet uncertain about what lay ahead, one thing remained clear. This was no longer just about building a whimsical feature. It had become a catalyst for broader discussion surrounding freedom of expression versus conformity within our neighborhood culture. Little did they know that every word spoken only strengthened my resolve. Every challenge faced would be met not just with determination, but also by rallying those who believed in embracing creativity alongside tradition. The ongoing conversation within my community about individual rights versus collective standards deepened with each meeting and discussion around my moat project. As I defended my right to create a unique landscape feature, I began to reflect on broader implications of these tensions, how they resonate not just with my experience but with many other homeowners grappling with similar issues. In communities like ours, the balance between personal expression and adherence to HOA regulations can often feel precarious. Many neighbors approached me after the HOA meeting, sharing their own stories of battles fought against restrictive rules. One neighbor, Lisa, lamented her struggle to plant a vibrant butterfly garden in her front yard, a colorful retreat intended to attract pollinators and be a source of joy for passersby. Despite her enthusiasm, she faced citations for violating HOA stipulations regarding allowed flower types and garden heights. "I just wanted something beautiful," she told me, her frustration palpable. But instead, I felt like I was being stifled for wanting to make my place feel like home. Then there was Tom, a friendly guy down the street who upgraded his backyard with a small fire pit for gatherings with friends. What he had envisioned as a cozy space for roasting marshmallows turned into a headache when Janet quickly informed him that fire pits were not allowed due to safety concerns that had been enacted without much community feedback. "I never thought I'd have to ask permission to enjoy my backyard," he sighed during one of our chats while we both worked on our projects. Through these anecdotes, it became evident that my moat was more than just an architectural whim. It represented a collective yearning for personal freedom within the confines of community living. The fear of breaking rules had held many homeowners back from fully realizing their creative potential and made them hesitant to push against boundaries. As I shared my thoughts at subsequent HOA meetings, I emphasized how fostering creativity could enrich our neighborhood rather than diminish it. People like Lisa and Tom shouldn't have to choose between their dreams and their compliance with regulations that seemed increasingly disconnected from community sentiment. What if our neighborhood became known for its individuality? I imagine aloud, what if we embraced unique features as part of our identity rather than resented them? To this end, I proposed the idea of hosting occasional community workshops where residents could discuss their creative projects and explore how they could be integrated into the existing framework without conflict. Perhaps we could reevaluate outdated rules or even promote innovative landscaping ideas that blended artistry with safety considerations. This suggestion sparked lively discussions among attendees. Some were skeptical yet curious, while others championed the thought of reviews leading toward positive changes in community dynamics. Conversations transformed from defensive posturing into brainstorming sessions filled with hope for future collaboration on shared goals instead of just complaints about violations. As the weeks passed and interactions continued amid supportive and dissenting voices alike, I realized that fighting for individuality was inherently tied to building connections across our diverse neighborhood landscape. The journey toward expressing oneself might involve grappling with hierarchy and fears initially rooted in conformity, but it also held promise in uniting people through shared experiences. In this struggle for self-expression set against the backdrop of community standards, it became clear every homeowner's battle contributed toward reshaping perceptions about what it truly meant to live in harmony while honoring individual aspirations. The story behind my moat transcended its whimsical appearance. It emerged as a symbol, a clarion call echoing through fences, urging us all collectively toward embracing creativity without sacrificing connection. As the months rolled on, the initial tension surrounding my moat and drawbridge project began to dissipate, replaced by a newfound sense of acceptance and curiosity within the community. The HOA had conducted its investigation, and while there were still murmurs of concern from some members, chiefly Janet, the overall atmosphere had shifted significantly. It appeared that my whimsical addition had sparked something deeper among residents, a movement towards embracing individuality within our shared spaces. The once ominous meetings transformed into open forums where creativity was celebrated rather than scrutinized. Neighbors who had previously hesitated to express their ideas now felt empowered to share their visions for personal projects. Lisa finally received approval to plant her butterfly garden after presenting her case during a community workshop, citing studies demonstrating ecological benefits and property enhancement. Tom's fire pit project was also greenlit after he agreed to adhere to safety guidelines, giving him the cozy gathering space he had always wanted. I found myself at the heart of this transformative journey, advocating not only for my own rights but also for those of my neighbors. Each workshop became an opportunity to explore how our individual expressions could coexist with community standards without compromising personal freedoms. We discussed potential guidelines that could foster creativity while ensuring safety and aesthetic coherence, ideas that resonated well beyond the confines of my moat. However, it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were still moments when Janet's voice cut through the enthusiasm like a knife. She remained steadfast in her belief that certain regulations should not be altered for the sake of whimsy. At one meeting, she declared, allowing these changes could lead us down a slippery slope toward chaos. But instead of suppressing dialogue, her stern demeanor inadvertently fueled further discussions from others who passionately championed diversity over monotony. The final resolution came during an annual neighborhood gathering held at the local park, a lively event filled with laughter, food stalls, and games for children. As I mingled with neighbors showcasing their projects, I noticed Janet standing off to the side with a contemplative expression. Gathering my courage, I approached her. "Janet," I said warmly, "I appreciate your concerns about maintaining standards, but look at how far we've come. Isn't this exactly what we should strive for? A balance between individuality and community?" To my surprise, she softened slightly and replied, "Maybe you're right. Perhaps we can find a way to incorporate more creativity without losing our identity." It was a breakthrough moment. Even someone as resistant as Janet began to acknowledge the value of personal expression within our neighborhood fabric. Reflecting on this journey made me realize how profoundly it had impacted not only my view on individual rights but also on community dynamics as a whole. Navigating through frustration and resistance taught me that asserting personal space doesn't have to be an act of defiance. Instead, it can foster connection and inspire collective growth. In the end, my moat became more than just a quirky feature. It morphed into a symbol of resilience against conformity and an emblem of community spirit celebrating diversity and expression. Through creativity and collaboration, we were reshaping what it meant to live harmoniously together while honoring our unique identities. As I stood by my moat one evening watching neighbors enjoy it, laughing as they crossed the drawbridge, I felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. This journey underscored that embracing individuality enriches communities far beyond aesthetics. It's about forging connections that allow us all to thrive together in spaces we call home.